welcome to another edition of Psyched for Psychology. We're glad to be with you again, and we're going to be talking about a popular book called The 4 Agreements.
Not 3, not 5.
Not 5.
4 agreements.
Right, yes.
All 4.
Yeah, we are excited. I've heard about this. I have some clients who have read this book.
Yep.
And really, it's been very helpful for them. And I've been learning about it through them.
Yes.
And you, Christa, you've read this book.
I have read this book. Actually, this book was recommended to me by my therapist many moons ago. And I just thought, it's kind of always on the back of my mind because I think the principles in it are so relatable and just like you had mentioned at one point, intuitive, I think.
Right. Yeah, it is. I think things that are profound are simple.
Totally.
And I think the 4 agreements are very simple to understand, not always easy to do. And if we can become fluent in that, if we become skilled in it, it really can enhance the quality of our lives.
Well, and the cool thing about it too is some of the teachings you probably have heard put another way. So it's like the wisdom that no matter kind of how you distill it, sometimes putting it in a different way can be really helpful. But I wanted to share a little bit about the author. So the 4 agreements, I was just checking the copyright on my copy of the book, which is 1997, which is already a little while ago.
Seems
apparently.
like just yesterday to me.
I know, me too. So Don Miguel Ruiz is the author. So his background is he was born in rural Mexico, and he kind of came from a family of healers. So his grandfather was a shaman, and his mother was also a type of healer, and they thought he would go on to follow in their footsteps and be a healer. Which
senior healer, or
yes,
right. Okay.
Because it's based on the Toltec knowledge. So I think the Toltec are one of the indigenous peoples of Mexico.
As far as I know.
As far as I know.
Yeah, you are correct.
Yes.
Yes.
And so, however, he decided instead he was going to become a doctor. And he went on to become a surgeon. But then he had a near-death experience. And he had fallen asleep at the wheel of the car. Wow. And then the car careened into a wall of concrete. Holy moly. So he basically left his physical body and had this whole experience. And when he came back, he sort of had a spiritual awakening and devoted himself to some of the teachings of his family and the Toltec wisdom. So, yeah, it's very cool.
He kind of came full circle then with his family.
Right.
And I think as you were talking, these aren't principles that are just particular to them. This is really, you find this in a lot of different faith traditions even too.
Exactly.
Yes.
And that's what I like about it because, and we can talk about that later, but I love that the wisdom in here, it doesn't have all the baggage that so many of the religions have. Right? So if you try to quote the Bible, someone might be like, whoa, hey,
wait a second. Right. Yeah.
Don't push that on me. Right.
Yeah, exactly.
But there's other ways of teaching the wisdom.
And I appreciate that too. When I was in seminary, there was a saying, all truth is God's truth. So I think that's really kind of what we're addressing. And this is not psyched for religion. This is psyched for psychology. So this actually does apply because it has effect or implications for us relationally too. So I'm really excited for us to talk about this. I'm looking forward to learning more from you.
Okay, great.
So let's begin. What is
the
the first agreement that we want to embark on?
Well, before we get into that,
okay,
well, the first agreement I believe is be impeccable with your word.
Okay.
So the backdrop too, I guess I'll just give a little more background on what he's talking about. So why 4 agreements? Why do we need these agreements? So he talks about from an early age, we are sort of programmed by the world, by our parents. We're kind of taught that you'll relate to this with DBT stuff is good or bad. We're all good or all bad. We're kind of taught
all or nothing.
And so we learn to basically judge ourselves and others very harshly. And his way of explaining that is we actually have a judge that lives in our mind that is constantly monitoring and kind of berating us at all times. That we're sort of always conscious of. It dictates what we do, our decisions. And he's basically positing that it's the underpinning of all suffering. You know, that if we didn't have this judge constantly at us.
Interesting.
Yeah. So if we didn't have this judge constantly at us, we wouldn't be so miserable all the time.
So if we could be free from judgment.
Yeah.
And yet judgment, like, we appeal to judgment all the time because within judgment is this idea of justice. And so I'm really eager to hear more because I think there's a place for justice. And I think everybody would agree with that.
Yes.
And there is a place for judgment.
Yep.
The difficulty, I think, is how do I get out from under this, which is what we do talk a lot about in DBT is learning to accept it. Yep. I'm a little messed up. And we were talking about this in a group yesterday, like Pink, the singer Pink, you would know as a singer, has a song about you're perfect or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, you have flaws and you make mistakes and you're perfect. And I thought, and I really commented in group, it was a great point that, hey, look how dialectical that is. You are messed up. You have things you've done. You've made mistakes, and look at you. You're perfect, and there's still value.
Yep.
And I wonder if that's what he's getting at here.
I think that's precisely what he's getting at because he's not saying there shouldn't be a moral code. It's like, because I think to your point, we're not saying there's no such thing as good or bad. Right. We're not saying there's no such thing as right or wrong. We're saying that I think kind of in our innocence as children, the way we learn to judge ourselves is very harsh. Right.
And that really applies to other areas of psychology. Like
Doesn't it?
the schemas, right? The narratives we have cognitively, we grow up with a common one. I'm not good enough.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly. So that is what he's referring to. And because we judge ourselves so harshly, we also tend to judge others very harshly. And it just becomes this whole cycle of the more we judge others, the worse we feel about ourselves and vice versa. So the 4 agreements he's saying is here's 4 things to live by that should reduce your suffering and help you out from under this oppressive judge that lives in your mind, basically.
Yes.
So that being said,
it's an important starting point. Yeah.
Right.
So,
right.
okay.
It's the kind of some context for us, right? So the first agreement is be impeccable with your word. Now, when I first hear that statement, I think it's saying like, you know, when you keep your word, you keep an agreement, right? Like,
sounds like a pretty high bar.
Yes. And so I think what helped me is the word impeccable. Imp and peccable are without sin.
Okay.
That's where that word is derived from, the Latin.
Okay, this isn't helping with the high bar in my mind. Okay.
I know, right? And I'm like, then we have the S word, sin, which again, so much baggage for so many people. Because they're like,
absolutely.
Right? So let's do a little focus on the word sin. So sin means error, actually.
Right. Well, from a Christian theological standpoint.
Sure.
Because that's another part of my life.
Yep.
It comes like if you think about it from an archery standpoint.
Yes, thank you.
You use archery and you try and hit the bullseye. So anything that doesn't hit the bullseye would be a, quote, sin. And so if you miss the bullseye by a little bit, that's a sin. Even if you miss if you miss it all completely, that's a sin. So they're both a sin, whether you're close or whether you're distant. It's just not hitting that perfect mark.
I love it.
So now I'm feeling anxiety because I so miss that mark all the time.
Yep.
And with my word and my convictions and things, I don't live up to that all the time. So
No,
I'm
so
actually
glad
having more anxiety now.
Oh, no. Well, hopefully we turn it around eventually.
Okay, I'm trusting you.
So basically, I'm so glad you reminded me because I knew it was something with archery or something with, right? So to miss the mark is basically what sin means, right?
Right.
So basically, impeccable is stay on, without missing the mark. So stay on the mark, basically, right?
Okay.
And he's saying the truth about yourself is that you are good enough. So if I'm telling myself words, so if I'm using my words to tell myself I'm not good enough, I'm basically making myself feel worse. I mean, he's saying that's like a sin, not in the way we think about with like you're going to hell type of a sin, right? But we're saying that's just missing the mark. If you tell yourself you're not good enough, you're missing the mark.
So it's counteracting
Yes.
the idea that we're not good enough, because that is an all or nothing.
Yep.
And so it's kind of like a counterbalance. If I think I'm all or nothing, I have to counterbalance this to say, no, I am good enough. And so,
Right.
But it's not like you were saying just a moment ago. It's not like saying I'm not messed up, I don't have problems either. It's just trying to have a balance. And I hear this a lot with clients too. Like they know inherently, I'm broken, I'm fallen, I don't do things the way I ought, and I wish I was better. And yet, do I still have worth? And so this sort of brings a synthesis of both.
Yes, exactly. And he actually says, so then he says, why your word, right? Because I just referred to it a minute ago as like your thoughts about yourself. But he says your word is the power that you have to create. So, and he actually quotes the Gospel of John in here. And he says, speaking of, the creation of the universe, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God, right?
Correct.
And so he says, through your word, you're expressing your creative power. So whatever you're going to say, you better be ready for that to basically come true for you in a way.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah. I think he might be. I'm trying not to get all theologically wonky here, but
no, that's okay.
I think, he's taking a little liberty out of context in the Gospel of John. However, I do think our words do provide meaning. Like
exactly. That's exactly what he's saying.
Whatever I say with my words is there's meaning, and so that becomes my reality. Correct. If I look at you and I think, Christa, she's always so upset with me. That's my reality. Those are the words I'm using to describe you. And it might be true, it might not be true, but it's true to me if I'm telling myself that.
There you go. Exactly. And so he's basically saying the word isn't just the sounds or the, written symbols. It's a force because it's the power you have to express, to communicate, to think. So it's all these things. It's not just what you say or think. It's like all of it together. Yeah. So it can either destroy your life or make your life beautiful, basically.
Absolutely.
So he actually says this is the most important of all the agreements because we can use our words to hurt ourselves, of course, or we can use our words to hurt others.
And,
so,
I think it's definitely both and. Yeah. So
if we are speaking about ourselves, so let's just think about in the course of a day, the word or the thoughts that you have about yourself. What do they say? How many thoughts do we have in a day? Like
about 77,000, give or take.
Is it really?
Yeah, women have more than men. And now get this.
Okay.
Of those, let's say 70,000, about 77% of those are negative.
Okay, thank you. That's where I was headed.
About 55,000 are negative every day. And now think about this. Of those 55,000 negative thoughts, conversations in our head every day, 90% of those are just regurgitated over and over again. So I'm 54. Gosh. Can you imagine starting this at age 5 for really half a century? About 55,000 conversations every day, 365 days a year, times 50 years.
Exactly. Well, and then if you bring it back to what he says about the judge is there chirping at you all day, every day, saying you didn't do that enough, you did that wrong, look at how so-and-so's doing it, just, again, that constant judge, right?
Right.
So first, I think he's trying to say, let's get a handle on, you have so much power at your disposal in your mind, right? Just what you're thinking, what you're speaking. So to be impeccable with your word is to speak the truth, I think, is basically what he's saying. Speak the truth about yourself, about others. Don't just give your judge impression, right, of yourself or others. So, yeah, I think that's kind of where he's coming from with this.
Well, and it reminds me of something within psychology called narrative therapy. Narrative therapy is looking at these narratives that we create, just like he's talking about there. And it's very empowering, which I love because we've talked about the importance of empowering ourselves. And even what Nystrom is about is empowering people to become the best version of themselves.
Exactly.
Narrative therapy is very empowering because it says, you know what, if you have constructed a narrative in your mind, now think about that. You have the power to construct it, so therefore you have the power to deconstruct it and reconstruct a new narrative. And notice how empowering that is. It's like Legos. right? You can construct with Legos, you can deconstruct it, you can reconstruct something else, or in today's vernacular, Minecraft. And so,
yes,
that's, I think, what he's talking about, which is very empowering and very true.
Yep, exactly. Another quote on this: being impeccable with your word is the correct use of your energy. It means to use your energy in the direction of truth and love for yourself. If you make an agreement with yourself to be impeccable with your word, just with that intention, the truth will manifest through you and clean all the emotional poison that exists within you. So he talks about this poison, and that'll come up in later agreements, but it's basically that negativity that we carry around with us. And it's so easy to try to put it onto other people, to project that emotional poison onto others with our words or with our actions, right? So what do you think of the first agreement?
Well, I think it's fascinating. And I see, at least in Christianity, I see some integration theologically, not completely. And I do see integration with psychology, too, as I was referencing with cognitive therapy, narrative therapy. So all truth being God's truth, I think there's a lot there. And I also believe that he's trying to bring balance to where we fall. It's all or nothing. Like, I can be thinking I'm terrible. And so he's trying to bring this counterbalance. But I think what can be a hurdle for people is that seems so selfish. That seems so, to use a phrase, to coin a phrase that's overused today, that seems so narcissistic, to love myself. And so now no, I can't do that. That's wrong. So I think we even have like a judgment against that. And really, he's trying to bring balance. He's not trying to say, you're awesome all the time, you're perfect, and so make your word perfect. Isn't it interesting, though? I think our mind tends to go there in these categories of all or nothing. So I think my takeaway is I'm flawed. I'm in many ways I'm broken. I was thinking about this just the other day. How much do I hurt people, and how much of other people hurt me? And I really think I've probably hurt other people more than people have hurt me. And I don't think I'm, that's particular to just me. I just know myself really pretty well. And so I think there are people we can struggle with. You know what? I know I don't live up to even my own standards. And I can have value at the same time. And I think that's what he's trying to bring here, is this balance that we don't have a lot.
Well, I think you brought up a good point about so I'm supposed to, love myself. That's so narcissistic, right? I think what I like about it is he's not even saying love yourself more than other people. It's like, just tell the truth about yourself, which is that you're good enough, right? Like, if we just take it back to basics, it's like, this is just the truth, right? Like, that you have inherent worth as a human being. So if you can just start with that, that's already just being honest about who you are. So, and if you operate from that place, even just I'm good enough, the words you say to yourself and to others are going to change, right?
It's true.
Because you don't feel the need to take others down or take yourself down. He mentions kind of towards the end of this agreement about gossip. So, and I actually was going to ask you if you wanted to do an episode on gossip sometime, because gossip just fascinates me. It's something that we all kind of, I mean, I don't know about you, but like I always like think to myself, I shouldn't gossip this, and this, but like I kind of love it. You know what I mean? But it's also like,
I have no idea what you mean.
Right? Sarcasm. But if I'm ever the topic of gossip, I of course am like, oh my gosh, that's so hurtful, right? But it's like we all get this little thing. And so he's talking about how gossip, is such a common main form of communication in society. It's become a way that we feel close to each other, but it makes us feel better to see someone else feel badly, like we do. So again, like if misery loves company, right? So if you're already struggling, not feeling good enough, you're going to talk about another person in that way and like, oh, so-and-so, right? And it kind of gives you makes you feel a little better inside, right? But it just keeps you all down. So,
absolutely. And I think that what's really important in that, what's so damaging about gossip and what's so damaging, I think what the author here is trying to bring up, when we don't have this balance that we actually have worth, we're just living in shame about ourselves. And then when we're gossiping, we're heaping shame upon somebody else. Now, I might be different than a lot of other people in our field in psychology. I think shame has a place. I think shame is not like a bad emotion. There's no bad emotion. Yeah, like if I've done something wrong, shame's appropriate. It gives me motivation to say, hey, Christa, I am really sorry about this.
Right.
However, when I feel shame over something I've not done wrong, now it's profoundly toxic.
Exactly.
And I think it's one of the most destructive forces in the world. And I don't think I'm even overstating that.
Yep.
And that's what I really appreciate that he's bringing up is that there is this shame that we can live in. Yep. And I've seen it with clients that it just absolutely destroys people's lives.
Well, I was just going to say how often has he gives this example, which I'll kind of, paraphrase is, how many times have you, let's say you're just starting like a new endeavor, a new class, and you meet the teacher or the kind of head of the organization.
Right.
And someone right before you met the person said to you, oh, look out for that person. Right? Yeah. Look out. So-and-so did blah, 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 and just says like, they are such a jerk and all this stuff. And so then you have this virus in your mind about that person. And you don't know if that's true at all.
And it really speaks to what you're saying. And he talks about at the beginning, words create.
Right, exactly. So look at how those words created an impression in your mind that, again, you have no basis for except for what this person said, but you have no other context or any other info. So you're like, oh, well, that must be true. Oh my gosh, I'm going to watch out.
Right. And we gossip about other people. And if you think about our own self-talk, how negative it is, we're kind of gossiping about ourselves.
Yep.
And it's one thing I do appreciate about Nystrom. I don't know if you know this, but our policy manual has a very strict rule.
About no gossip.
No gossip. And I think we're highlighting why.
Exactly.
We're actually doing contrary to what we're trying to tell our clients is to live healthy interpersonally.
Yep.
But it's so damaging and there's so much shame when we gossip. And so, and I think our media is all about that. It's all about gossiping and shaming. And
well, even like I belonged to a couple of groups on Facebook for a while that were kind of, even like community, what's going on in the neighborhood type stuff can be like gossip, right? Because again, it's like on the one hand, it might be helpful information. On the other hand, you look in the comments and it's just like people are just being nasty to each other.
Absolutely.
And it's like, whoa, this got out of hand, right?
Yeah, it does. It gets out of hand very quickly. And what I've learned, I used to be a youth pastor in Northbrook, Illinois, many years ago.
Wow.
And so I'm working with teenagers and I'm working with their parents. And I realized something. We don't really grow up. We get older.
Yes.
But all the same high school dynamics, which we're talking about here, actually carry on into adulthood, into the office, into those holiday settings where we're all together and people are still gossiping. Or you go to the holiday setting, people drive home and then they talk about so-and-so, Uncle Buck or whatever, and it really, it's sad when I think about it. And we don't even recognize a lot of times that this is very juvenile behavior, but it's very much akin to our DNA, if you will. And he's trying to speak against that because it creates meaning. It's creating something, and it's usually destructive.
Yep. I'm glad you mentioned that about kind of, did you mention the holidays?
I did.
Because I think, too, we were talking about, okay, so it's about to be December. Actually, it's December 1st as we're recording this today.
Yes.
And we're heading into, the holiday season. And so maybe let's wrap up this episode talking about how can we apply the first agreement this month.
Right. Maybe we can start to just agree we're going to have a healthy holiday.
Yes.
And so what are the implications then of having your word be impeccable when you are celebrating the holidays? And I think, first of all, it's got to start internally.
There you go.
Garbage in is garbage out. So if we're thinking and having these negative self-talk or narratives in our mind, we need to be aware of that, first of all.
Agreed.
How am I thinking? When I am thinking about anticipating this holiday event, whether it's at work or with family or wherever, what am I thinking about in terms of myself? Where am I not good enough?
Yep.
Why do I think I'm not good enough? Because I don't have a job, because I don't have a partner, because I make so much money or whatever, or
Right.
So maybe it's like first identifying where do I not feel enough and believe I'm not enough before I start thinking about everybody else.
Yes, I like that, because it's kind of like, in order to change any given behavior, you first have to observe it, right? So observing your own self-talk, observing the spots where you feel maybe less than or insecure, and that's going to tell you where your weak spots are, basically where your vulnerabilities are. Because if I'm not, I know for me, jealousy is something for me when I'm not feeling good enough about something. And in the holidays, when you are meeting up, let's say you're meeting up with friends, you're meeting up with family, and you're kind of seeing like the status of people's lives, right? You're seeing like what they have going on. And I know for me, sometimes I'll compare myself with what my peers have going on when I see them for the holidays. Like I see their homes, or I see their families, or I see whatever. And so that is a good time for me to be aware. If I'm feeling less than, I might be tempted to use my word to take someone else down. Because it's like, well, I'm not feeling good about myself, so I'm going to say pss, pss, pss about so-and-so.
Right.
And again, it happens so quickly. But if I'm conscious of it, I'm going to be more aware that I'm not going to go into gossip. I'm not going to go into like, oh gosh, can you believe, because I'm just going to be like, no, that's not how this works. I mean, it's a choice. I can do it if I want to, but it usually doesn't help me feel better. So,
right. I'm glad you brought up the comparison piece, because I think that's where it starts. Internally, we are comparing.
Yep.
And then we don't feel very good about ourselves. And so how do we deal with that? Well, it's kind of like gossip. In our mind, we start thinking about somebody else and tearing them down in some way.
Yes, exactly. And I think the part where I need to be impeccable with my word is, if I'm feeling jealous, I'm telling myself that what I'm doing is not enough. Right?
Right.
Like, so that's the first thing to correct is like, well, who says I should be in the same place this person's in? Like, don't believe the judge is going to come in and say, well, you should be doing that too, Christa. Right? You should have that. You should be with that person. You should blah, 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 blah. Right?
Did you just use the SH word?
Yes.
Can't believe you're swearing
the
on
favorite
the podcast.
word of the judge, right?
No, notice how we do that, though. We should on ourselves. We should on other people. And it's a very shouldy thing to do, especially going into the holidays. I mean, it makes for a shouldy holiday,
We're going to have to put the explicit mark on this episode, that E.
So maybe the title could be How Not to Have a Shouldy Holiday.
There you go.
Yeah.
I like it.
Or maybe we'll come up with something more positive. But I think it does highlight really how we contaminate our holidays in this, what he's talking about, this own self-talk that kind of then manifests, we counteract it to make ourselves feel better by shoulding on other people. And so all these shoulds really bring, I always say this, shoulds bring shame, and shame leads to shut down and shutting others out. And so that's what can happen a lot at the holidays is we feel shame, we project shame onto other people in our mind. And so maybe let's counteract that then. So what do I do if words create, and we're highlighting how this creates toxic kind of shame within ourselves and others, how do we combat that? What do we do?
Well, I would say both internally and externally. So internally, start questioning the statements that are coming from the judge, questioning the S words, right?
Right,
the
yes.
shoulds. And start substituting maybe some other statements, positive statements, right? And then when it comes to others, I know it's not always just so simple as just, well, think positive thoughts. It's not that, but it's just really monitoring at all times, right? Like, how am I speaking to myself? And then when it comes to others, just notice opportunities to build people up versus tear people down, right? So, and I also say a good rule of thumb when it comes to gossip is, if you're talking about someone who's not present, just be aware, right? Again, you could be saying something positive about someone who's not present. But if you're talking about someone who's over there in the other room, is it positive or is it negative, right? Because again, good point. Anything you would say to that person, you should, right? Like, if you wouldn't say it to their face, don't say it behind their back, right?
Nor in your head.
Exactly. So I think just, again, being really aware of what we're thinking, and then how can I build other people up instead of try to tear other people down, even if they're not there.
So, in what I'm hearing you say is be very intentional about this.
Yep.
And we've talked before about coping ahead. We try to cope
Ahead for the
once
holidays.
we get to the holiday celebration. We try to cope there, but now we can cope ahead. And the way you do that is kind of what you're talking about, being very intentional. Mm-hmm. Right now, envisioning how things are going to be when you're with family and friends during the holidays, and envisioning yourself being very positive towards yourself, towards others, envisioning what you're going to say, envisioning how you're going to think about people. And if it's hard, well, here's a little tip. You can just be intentional about your and. So if you think, yeah, Uncle Buck, boy, he's so self-centered. And so you don't finish there. You insert an and say, he's so self-centered. And I've really appreciated when he's done this for me in the past. And we're bringing a balance, because I could hear some people listening to this and saying, oh, so I'm just supposed to live in denial and,
Good point. Great point.
Positive thoughts. No, we're bringing what he's talking about in this first agreement. We're trying to bring balance, not stick our head in the sand and say everything and everyone is wonderful.
Good point.
So we insert the and to bring a more balanced perspective, and it might help us, I love this phrase, shine a light rather than curse the darkness.
Nice. Support the solution.
Yes.
Right. Instead of protest the problem.
I like that. Yeah, you're on a roll.
I know, right? Well, I hope this was helpful, everybody, to realize that your word is extremely powerful. It's your creative force. Be impeccable with your word. That's the first agreement. And we will be back again soon with the other 3. Take care, everybody, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you as always for listening, and please be sure to leave us a review. While this podcast can't be a replacement for therapy, we hope you enjoyed our discussion today and join us again next time. Nystrom & Associates is always available to those who are struggling. If you find yourself in need of support and help, please check us out at nystromcounseling.com.